Welcome, I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher, from our BizVision studios in the UK. You're watching the Conscious Matters show on the BVTV network. For this quarter of 2021, I'm focusing my special guest interviews on the conscious agenda, planet, people and profits, along with my theme for this quarter of Awaken. One word, Awaken. There's a lot of misinformation around the conscious agenda, with too many people thinking it reduces profit opportunities. That's totally wrong. It can be the other way. A company cannot create wealth if it doesn't make profits, but in today's altered world, it can also do it with a social conscience. And investors are seeking such conscious companies. Now, getting this message across is one of my personal goals for 2021, and I'm delighted that I'm finding other champions of the conscious agenda. And today, I'm taking you back to meet someone who so impressed me on my first visit to her that I've been pestering her to allow me a return interview. She's the capital advisor to angel investors and networks and host of the podcast Compassionate Capitalist. So let's say hello again to Karen Rands. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Malcolm. It's so great to be back here. Thank you so much.
And I suppose you're basking in sunshine in Atlanta on this, which is Inauguration Day, are you?
Oh, yes. It's a little brisk out there, but it is definitely a bright, shining day.
Yeah, in many ways. Look, we both. I've got my sort of Union Jack tie on, and you got your red, white, and blue on. So
yes, and our pearls,
yeah,
for
we've made the effort. We've made the
yes.
effort. Okay. Anyways, Karen, thanks for allowing me back again. And let's have a quick update. Obviously, coronavirus and economic impacts may have interrupted matters, but are you still finding a growing interest in investors seeking to put their money into businesses embracing the conscious agenda?
Yes, Malcolm. Actually, there is a lot of things that happened in this 2020 has really elevated the way investors and businesses look at how they're making their investments. They are, diversity and inclusion, has been something that's been talked about a long time, but because of the Black Lives Matters and the racial injustice that we saw through the summer and the outcry on that, and the the realization that so many startup businesses that of women or people of color were not represented within the portfolios of angel investor groups and venture capitalists, that it's been quite amazing that how many conferences or like pitch events or investor gatherings, and now, as a result of the coronavirus and the pandemic, so much of that is done online than ever before. So the convenience of investors participating has grown because they don't have to make arrangements to travel places and time out their schedule. They're just spending that hour of watching pitches. And so we have seen a dramatic effort to find companies like that, and two, to allocate capital for that, and a growing awareness where people are making a proactive effort. And then within that, they also, science is real, and so they're coming back into the thing and asking some of those questions on what is the footprint or what is the impact in the operations of that company. And so it's not only the people, but it's the planet, which is, of course, kind of what are your focuses right now. So we have seen that, and the money's not drying up. There is definitely still very much active investments going on, increase in angel groups, private equity funds that are looking to make acquisitions or invest in your non-traditional tech kind of companies. That is bigger. The pool of those kind of funds is bigger than it's really ever been before.
Yeah, brilliant. And I've been reading about President Joe Biden's intentions regarding federal spend, and he wants a lot of the procurement money to go towards smaller businesses and businesses started and run by particularly women of color and other really conscious investments, and of course lots to do with the planet. Now, you're the intermediary between the business owner and the funder, with both sides trusting your experienced judgment. What can an entrepreneur with an eye on the conscious agenda we're discussing, do to increase his or hers likelihood of achieving funding? Or put it another way, what should they avoid doing?
Okay, well, I think the probably the biggest thing is to include within their language. So on the plus side, include within their language how they're addressing this. What is the budget that they're going to have for work-life balance? Are they going to start including daycare or family care or something like that? Are they going to embrace? Because there's been government programs around for a long time that never went away that gives like particularly government contracts. If you are 8A, one of the minority capacities, and there's a pretty diverse list of what qualifies within that. What is to get engaged in contracts, and so that's been around for a while. But then there's a movement now we saw as a result of the I guess the pandemic and people being unemployed, and the fact that the existing employment systems that would give them compensation, there's this term called gig economy. And so a lot of people that had were getting by working multiple jobs. A school teacher that also drives for Uber or something like that, or delivers food, or works at a Home Depot on the weekends, right? They just do that to be able to pay for their family. Well, when they become unemployed, they only get one unemployment check. They don't get the second one for the one that they needed, right? And so this idea of a living wage has become something that is really important. And so I think investors are looking, and entrepreneurs can be looking at what is it that they're going to pay their regular people. Now, granted, high level, whatever, but the gap between what is the top level executive compensation and the lowest level, spotlight was shined on that before the pandemic when we had, because of the banking crisis, and there was some of those congressional hearings where the president of the bank was making outrageous amounts of money, more than what the teller made. And the teller, being in that, barely getting by category. And so investors now are looking at, well, when I'm going to invest in this company, what is their philosophy when it comes to how they treat their people going forward through this, and how are they going to embrace that, this movement where they say, well, over the next couple of years, they're going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And so that also addresses, well, right now we have a lot of folks that maybe have some form of a disability that are brought in to, give them a purpose in working a low skilled job. So will those people be replaced by robots? What is going to be the thing? Because when you start to raise your baseline expense line like that, or will they not have as many jobs? What's going to be the effect of that? And I think if businesses can get ahead of that, because that train is leaving the station.
Yes.
So they could get ahead of that to show that they have a value. I saw an article the other day about, Starbucks gets, mixed reviews on all kinds of different fronts, right? But they're talking about how it is one of those places that a lot of people will choose to work because they have such great benefits. And that becomes something that when you look into the total package of what you offer, it's not just what the minimum wage is, but what are all the other perks that you offer that make it something that a two income family can have their benefits when somebody's a small employee, small business owner, and has to provide their own insurance, but they can get insurance from a spouse's job that is, isn't as demanding, but they can get the good benefits. So all of that is part of the play of a story. So entrepreneurs need to weave that into their presentation as to what they're going to do with that. And I think bringing manufacturing back into the United States is a big movement for that. A lot of the private equity funds are looking at companies that have really good process management and really are looking at what the bottom line is and how they choose to use their dollars. And it's not just about cutting expenses. It's about the quality of the operations. And you can, as you say, create a more profitable business if you look at it in this holistic way rather than just, trying to, get a nut and bolt for, pennies less.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, the one thing that's exciting since we last chatted as well, I've talked to lots of investors and banks and so on in the City of London in the UK there, and they've got a parallel thinking. So what I'm quite excited about is from today onwards, and listening to what President Biden's doing and what we're saying over here, we could be going on parallel lines. So everything you're saying is not just relevant to the USA, it's going to be relevant to many more countries. Now, again, since we last met, which was back in that dark year called 2020, I've been delighted with the amount of people who are realizing that the conscious agenda of planet, people, and profits is the way we all need to go. But my worry is that there's still too many businesses firefighting COVID, etc., and all the other things at the moment, that they haven't taken time to look up and see how the world is altering. Now, you've got a brilliant feel of what's happening in business. What's your thoughts here? And what do you say to such business leaders who haven't yet taken the time to look up and around?
Okay, so I've thought about this some, Malcolm, because I've done it on my own podcast, on the Compassionate Capitalist podcast. I've interviewed different people, sort of, looking out and seeing what the trends are and seeing it. And it's like the way, it's the workforce. It's the work of tomorrow. I forget exactly. There's a trend. There's a term that they're calling it now, but it's how do we get our work done? And this idea of having to go into an office. And the work-life balance part of it that says, is it really necessary to do sales by getting on a plane and going away from a family for a period of time? Is it really? And then, the environmental impact of all that plane flying, right? And so, people have figured out that they can do business in new ways. And so some of those people that maybe have, they're just sort of like waiting to get back to normal because they need to they will be reassessing because there will be employees that don't want to go back to that new normal. And there's sales reps that now have become quite successful and their customers say, we don't want to see you. The sales process has changed, right? If they can, how do you convince somebody that you have a better product if you're not taking them to lunch? To buy their favor or go play golf with them or something, or golf is still something everybody does because it's outside. But there's, what is the difference in the way that how we get business done has changed. And what can I learn from that ultimately affects the bottom line, right? Because if you don't have to pay for a lot of rental space on an office building, what else can you do with that money that benefits your people? Right. And then, and likewise, restaurants will be forever changed. The entertainment space is going to be forever changed. They're trying to figure that out. I have, and some of them are like some of my friends that are small business owners in, the hospitality space. They've had to figure out how to reopen. And the nice thing about some of the economic stimulus information, financial stuff is that some of them have reopened and doing it in a different way. And they're going, okay, this works. This doesn't work. This is good. I think I might be able to still do this. What's the new norm of, I don't have to have, again, all this rental space for people to have lots of tables close to each other if I can modify my business model and do things a little bit differently. So I think we're having a major transformation in the way commerce is done and the way business is conducted, and will have a long lingering fact. And investors are trying really hard. I mean, look at telemedicine. Telemedicine's been around for a long time, but there hasn't been an everyday aspect of it that the average person. People in corporate jobs might have had it as a bonus. My husband had it. I was used to using telemedicine for many years, but I had my cousin who lives out in a rural community had never done telemedicine, and
Mm.
she needed to, and it was really like she was very fearful of like, how is this going to work? How am I going to do my doctor? How am I going to do all this stuff? And her little doctor's practice had figured out how to do it with their nurses, and it wasn't just some doctor in the sky. It was the regular person that she had been dealing with her grandbabies all along. And you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah,
dear, I don't
yeah,
know that people would necessarily want to go back to doing business as usual when they now have, time. The value of how you spend your time, who you spend it with, has become a valued commodity, if you will, than from before. So I think all of that stuff is shifting, and investors are paying attention to it.
brilliant. Yeah. Karen, just before we move on to the next question, let's make sure everyone has taken down the details of your URL, your website, so they can follow through on this interview. I'll read it out for listeners, but viewers can see it on the screen behind me. For listeners, it's KarenRands.co. I'll spell that out for you. Karen is Karen, Karen. Rands is Rands. KarenRands.co. Now, no, I haven't missed something out on the suffix. It is .co, which is one of the new website suffixes, isn't it? KarenRands.co. Karen, let's get back to money. Where do you think aspiring entrepreneurs or even established business people let themselves down on their knowledge of money? I personally think that they don't look at different forecast scenarios, believing that they need to have just a bullish approach. What's your thoughts?
Well, that's a doozy of a question. I would say that they don't, the whole adage of saving for a rainy day, right? And anticipating, when people are raising capital, the people on the other side of the table, and the people like myself that advise them and help them go about doing that, always say that, you need to, whatever you're raising, you need to up it about 50% over what you think you need. And if you think it's going to take you 6 months, 9 months to raise $3 million or whatever it is, you really need to plan on at least a full year. And you've got to have sort of this cushion, right? And, what we saw is people, you never can, there's always the potential of something that is going to derail your business. And we saw that, who could predict a pandemic, but people did, right? And so putting a part of your budget in, or when you're raising capital or raising your next round of capital, that is for contingency plans, and for what is your, there's like this thing called Keyman Insurance, right? So you hardly ever see that in somebody's list of things that they're going to spend their money on, but you really need to have your succession plan. Who's going to take over? Who's second in line, third in line? If you're a family-owned business, how does that work, right? Because you never know whether it's a health issue, an external circumstance like we've had here, or something else that will stop the business in its tracks or really shift it in a way that could not be anticipated. So what are you doing to make sure your investors are protected, your employees are protected, and your key staff is protected through Keyman Insurance? For people that don't know what that means, it's basically insurance that says if the key people, the top level people, are incapacitated to do this business, then they're going to have insurance that will sustain the business until they can get over that hump, that gap. And then a succession plan says who's going to be next in charge. So it's not just like, oh, my vice president's going to now be president. It is who's got the keys? What is the plan of operation and the shift in your org charts and things like that? And it's hard planning. I mean, there's people that work on that, but, and then also it's the technology side of it. So what are you protecting? How are you protecting your technology, not only from hacks and from, and from, catastrophes, because of the fact that we have been not paying attention to the environment as much. We have natural disasters happening all the time, right?
Mm,
And so where are you storing your data? Where are you storing your stuff? And this goes to municipalities as well as businesses. What is your contingency plan that says if all of a sudden our main facility is gone, or we can't get access to it, how do we get access to all that stuff, because it's safely stored, backed up someplace else, and that is that in the budget line, right?
yeah.
And so those are those things that people really need to consider and think about as they're preparing for this, and be thinking about, pivots, right? That's where, so I have one source of business, and if something were to happen, that what's my second source of business, or what can I do now so I have multiple sources of business, so that I have a more sustainable business that way, right? And so those are part of the things. And one thing that was brought to my attention that I hadn't thought about when it comes to this new world order of people working from home, and that is, there's so many ways that people can be, your main data, your business can be interrupted, and these ransomwares put on there, because they can come in through your child. You're using, if you're not using a VPN, or if you're just logging in through the internet, well, guess what, your child that's doing distance learning is on that same internet. And there's all different ways that people might come through and get through to your small business, and be able to hijack your operations. And so taking the little bit of setting aside money, so that you have the ability to protect one of your not only your people, but your data and your operations, is a responsible thing for businesses to do. And investors they don't look at that at the very first thing, but when they get into due diligence, that is something that they're considering as part of their investment criteria.
Yeah, and it really is a big danger. I was interviewing a technology specialist the other day, and he took me through how a typical person working from home, how they could be hacked through their fridge, for example, if the fridge
Oh,
was Internet of Things and things like so simple. I gobsmacked. No, can you've kindly allowed me to revisit you, so I think I can get away with a personal question.
okay.
Who is the real Karen Rands? What drives you? What makes you want to jump out of bed in the morning?
Well, my thing, your focus is on the conscious capitalism. So mine is compassionate capitalism and an economic stimulus. Okay. And it's using reallocation of the money that's sitting there in the sidelines, that's sitting there in a big fat 401k, or in a unstable stock market, even all of these other assets, and educating in people that of all incomes really can participate in investing in entrepreneurs now, because and every country has its own set of crowdfunding types of laws, but almost all of them have some form of one of those laws that says people that aren't the super rich, the accredited investors, the people making over $300,000-$400,000 a year, can participate. They just have participate at a smaller level, and really trying to convey the idea that people can be a master of their financial future by not just trying to save up that $50,000 or $30,000 to go buy their first piece of investment property or rental property, but out of that money, even if it's just $10,000, they can make $1,000 investments in up and coming small companies, or that business down the street that is making the recovery in this, as we come out of these pandemics. And you love this place that was down the street, and they've had to pivot their business. They've had to, maybe they're trying to, remodel their facility so they can have a more spacious outdoor area, or do something, whatever it might be. It's whatever business, it's local business that you can invest in, as well as ideas and concepts and things that you as an investor are passionate about, and you see that there's other entrepreneur carries that passion. Will figure out what it is, That's what kind of why I wrote the book that's on your thing here, right? Figure
Mm,
out what it is that you know about and figure out how much money you have that you have a flexibility to put towards those types of investments and get smart about how to add that into your investment portfolio, because we can recover our economies so much faster if we all get in it to figure out which businesses are worthy of being uplifted, and they may not, and not just go into the bank, but when you invest in them, then you get to share in their success too, without all the risks of being your own entrepreneur. And
mm,
so that idea of compassionate capitalism, of finding something you're passionate about, a company that you're passionate about, and investing in that so they can bring innovation to the market if it's a new type of company, or just jobs, to the market, and create wealth for those employees, for the founders, for the investors as they succeed. That's what I love to do, and
right.
push that forward
I
into
can
the
I can feel the
sphere every
passion. I
day.
can feel the passion. Now, before we move on to the next question, tell us about your book. You can see, viewers, a pull of it, as an image of it on the screen behind me. Tell us about the book. Who's it for, and what can it do for them?
So it's the Inside Secrets to Angel Investing. It's a step-by-step guide to, successful strategies for investing in private equity and creating generational wealth. And I originally wrote it because, as I ran an angel investor group. I rebooted a group that had been started years before. I joined it sort of as a Girl Friday, helping out with the meetings and doing the screening of deals and helping coordinate the meetings with the investors. And I had met so many investors. And when I first left my corporate job, I'd never heard of angel investing. I heard of venture capital, but I'd never heard of angel investing. And it made sense to me that individuals are write checks to these companies. Like, how does this company get from here to here when they can't get a bank loan and they can't get venture? It made sense once I knew about it, but I didn't know that they existed. And so as I started meeting these investors, and I would say, well, how'd you get started? Why'd you invest in this company or that company or not this company? And I started I had this kind of set of questionnaires. It was one of um, I think it's Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. One of his premises was, to go out and meet and sit down and meet with people that are where you want to be and ask them how they got there. And so that was one of the things that I would do. I'd have coffee with all these investors, and I had this thing. So I had started accumulating this knowledge of what made an investor tick and how they get started. And one of the things that they would share with me, which was just boggled my mind, was that, a friend had invited me to a meeting and I'd come into some money because I had golden parachute or left a company or so, whatever it might be. And I got invited to this meeting. I liked this company. I invested. I lost my money. I did it a couple more times. And then eventually I figured out how to make money at it. I was like, that's a horrible way to learn how to be an angel investor. You got to have some serious desire to stick with that if that's the best way you can figure out how to make money at it. And when I was rebuilding it, I had written on an encouragement of a wealth manager that was part of this angel investor network, to provide sort of like step by steps and some information about how to be an angel investor. And it was back when ebooks were just PDFs that you sent around. So I had started that. I was using it as a tool for my own investor. We grew to be one of the top 50 in the nation, and then the recession hit. And a lot of my investors were people that own their own businesses or were execs in companies. They hadn't had like a liquidity event or something like a lot of the .coms or tech companies were. And so they were they were having to man their own shop. And I realized when I did the research on it that there was about, depending on which list you look at, 5 to 8 million Americans that are making over $350,000 a year on their W-2, meaning they're getting a paycheck from someplace. Okay. And less than 3% of those ever participated in angel investor groups or angel investing. I was like, wow, that's a huge pull. So when the recession hit, and this happened with my angel group, and then the Jobs Act in the United States, which established 4 ways to raise money through general consultation, direct public offering, and I won't go into all that detail. But to me, it was the call for the great economic democratization of the capital markets. And that's a mouthful, but that basically says that it's not just this old boys club of tech companies that, reinvest in each other and keep making more and more money. It now had a level playing field that anybody could participate in what I described earlier, in creating wealth by investing in entrepreneurs. And things that we had taken for granted, like that we take for granted now, 3D printers,
Yeah.
drones, smartwatches, even things like the fidget widget, right? Even
Right.
these things were all funded through reward-based crowdfunding. And those people, those companies went on, all those people that put millions of dollars in it never made a penny off of that growth of that company and that success. And, the way real estate had gone, now people, there's all kinds of training on that. And I realized what I had started with my ebook still existed. There was still no real training for people to decide, should I be an angel investor? How do I become an angel investor? How do I know how much money I should invest in this or allocate to this? What's the process? What's the language? What do the documents look like? What do I need? I don't know anything about this. And so I wrote Inside Secrets to Angel Investing. It's just that. It's the inside secrets to how do all these people keep compounding their wealth, and how do you get started in that? And it's targeted towards those. It started with those 5 to 7 million that have never done it, that are savvy stock market, savvy real estate. But it's really something that can apply to anybody. And I've had a lot of millennials contact me that don't make $350,000 a year, that want to learn how to invest in crowdfunding companies and make that decision criteria, and do that because they can put $1,000 in instead of $10,000 or $25,000 in. And so, it's really for those people that say, this is something interesting. Is it right for me? And how do I go about doing that? And there's a whole resource portal that comes from it that gives them all those tools, like a checklist, due diligence checklist, and a tool to evaluate and score a company when they're looking at business plans, and just all kinds of tools. What do term sheets look like? All that stuff, a glossary, everything that you kind of need to get started. They get access for $20. And so,
Excellent. Yeah.
it's available on Amazon in the UK and everywhere. So
That's incredible value. And obviously they can access to buy the book via your website at karenrands.co. And is it on other online platforms?
yeah, so on the website, if they go to where the book is, they can get an excerpt of it. They can, look at, stuff that's about it. But also, yes, it's available on Amazon. And they can get it, all around the world, the UK as well. And also, in the US, if you like to shop at Barnes and Noble or something like that, then you can just, give them the title and they'll order it for you.
Excellent. Okay. Now, penultimate question. You're a successful woman in a tough business, and that business is money. The world needs more of you, obviously, but it seems to me that we're not genuinely creating the right environment for women entrepreneurs. For example, in London, only 5% of just 5% of venture capital goes to women startups. In Los Angeles, they tell me it's higher at 15%, but that's still not enough. What's your thoughts here? And what would you say as words of encouragement to those aspiring women entrepreneurs, especially those seeking funding?
Thank you for that question, Malcolm, because this has been something that I've been involved in, long before it became, a hot topic now, in trying to figure some of that out. I've been, invited to be part of different White House initiatives and, think tank kind of things and stuff. So part of what they figured out is that there's 3 things that go into the reason why that is happening. There is there's women that don't have the confidence, to be bold enough to, ask for the money. They don't know that they have the ability to ask for the money. So they kind of try to go it alone, go it their own. So women oftentimes, so if you look at the total pool of women-owned businesses versus, that a lot of times they're service-oriented businesses. They're things that they can do from home. So they're really not in the pool of what would be a venture capital or an angel-backed type of business. So, it's a smaller pool that would, kind of play in the game, so to speak, than what, inflates that number. But as you say, from the money side looking in, it is only like 5%. And in some markets, it's higher. Part of the reason in one of the cases is that there's this whole idea of STEM. Okay. So it's educating generationally women to be more in the mathematics and the engineering and in the tech space that traditionally has been those businesses that would attract that kind of capital. So we probably about 10 or 15 years ago was when there was an emphasis of doing that, and so then now they have like organizations that are only maybe 5 or 6 years old, like Black Girls That Code and things like that. So they're elevating the education of women to enter into these fields that they can, be in the traditional game of that. But one of the things that's been interesting too, so that's part of it. It's understanding, that you knowing your story, not trying to be, play a man's game, but understand your business opportunity, where it's going, what the potential is, and owning that and stepping up to it, and not accepting all the no's. There are people out there that will find it, and everybody has to go through the no's. And sometimes you got to buckle up and say, you know what? They're not saying no to me. They're saying no to this particular business opportunity. And I just have to find the right investors that will understand the business opportunity, because there is a sexual bias out there. And so sometimes there will be that. I've always thought that for the longest time I didn't. And I'll share a story on that. And then I'll say where some of the saving graces for the women-owned businesses are. So I had this woman back when I was doing this business. It was back when mobile apps, there really wasn't mobile apps. There really wasn't, it was online commerce, and they hadn't really gone to mobile commerce. And she had invented this, I guess, a screening or restructuring where like shopping e-commerce could be morphed to fit into a phone. So you didn't have to do that big slide across and all this kind of stuff and things like that. And she had come out of the advertising area in Madison Avenue and knew that this was a real problem for like the Macy's of the world and things like that. So she got up, she pitched this, she had customers, she was really going, and she talked about the market opportunity and where it was. And I couldn't believe that there really weren't that many people interested in her deal. So afterwards, when I'm talking to the investors and I'm asking them, well, what do you like? What do you think about that? And I had this one guy say to me, well, she doesn't have enough faith in her business because it is a much bigger opportunity than what she said it is. And so she's either not the person to do it, because she doesn't have the gumption, the guts to go after it, or she came across as weak. And she was trying to not inflate it and for them to think that she's this girl that's, talking about this huge business that, really, right? Yeah. And it was a lesson learned for her. And she went on and sold the company and made a bunch of money and all that kind of stuff. But that's where you own your truth to power, that you if you know what it is, guys have no problem saying it's going to be this big and I'm the person to do it. So you as women can do the same thing. The second thing is that we found that when it comes to women raising money on crowdfunding, they have, and I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head, but they have an exponentially higher average of success in raising money through these direct public offering than men do, because women are really good storytellers and they can tell a story. And a lot of times when you're raising capital through these direct public offering, it's part of what you're doing is telling the story. And so, and you get away from the sexual bias of this or that, and that group of which is traditionally white men in a room that you're pitching to. You're now pitching to a larger audience of potential investors. And if you do the work, it's still just as hard to raise money through a direct public offering, through any kind of crowdfunding, thing, as it is, going around meeting to meeting to meeting. It's just as hard. In some cases, it's harder, right? You got to prepare a lot ahead of time. But women are really having great success at raising capital through the online platforms.
Brilliant. Yeah. Now, sadly, Karen, final question, because I've got to leave for an inauguration party, well, a socially distanced one. And our first quarter theme with guests is Awaken, especially with a conscious agenda of planet, people, and profits in mind in this altered world. What three things do you want people watching this interview, listening to this interview, to awaken to or think about in respect of your work?
Well, whether there's a marriage between conscious capitalism and compassionate capitalism. Okay. So when you are deciding how you're going to invest and even the products that you're going to buy, you need to be more aware of because you're in control, the dollar or the pound, the euro, whatever it is, right? Cash is king. Okay. And so when you have the ability to direct your money in certain ways, do that, right? We have this thing that they've been, cancel culture, they're calling it. But what it really is that people taking a stand, a consciousness of how they spend their money. And so whether they're spending their money as a company that says, what products am I going to carry? Where am I going to put my money to work? How am I going to invest it? Corporate venture funds, how am I investing those? All of that stuff. Your money matters. And what you put it in, if you only want to do public stock, you can invest in companies that are public that have a conscious agenda. You can privately invest in companies that you believe are going to have a long-term sustainable business plan because of how they view their local environment, their local community, their internal character, how they treat their employees, how they treat their vendors outside of that. That's the consciousness of how they do it, who they choose to do business with. And so when you're directing it, in my case, in the compassion side, into private companies, instead of just, buying and selling real estate and stocks, right? There's a marriage there that I want to raise everybody's awareness that they can be in charge and they can change the world as we know it in the way that they choose to direct their money. People like to espouse libertarianism, right? Because it's not a particular party. It's about, being conscious. In theory, it was always about being conscious. Well, I'm going to invest in a company that doesn't spew coal dust into the rivers or whatever, right? That was a libertarian. We're going to do the right thing. Well, in reality, there's a whole lot of people that don't always do the right thing. And they are about making a buck at the expense of the environment or their people or, everything else, choosing to do business with the lowest common denominator of whatever outsourced, manufacturing can be. Well, we are now in a consciously aware world that you, as the person listening to this, that has, whether you're a public investor or want to become a private investor, or just how you run your company, because other people are looking at that. And it is going to be, the dollars are being put, the cash is being put to direct and drive us to a more conscious and considerate, compassionate world.
Brilliant, Karen. On this very special day, which I'm sure is going to be an awakening in the USA, as well as we're looking forward to a whole new relationship with the USA in the UK. I want to say thank you, Karen, for such an inspiring and stimulating interview. Thanks again for a visit.
You're quite welcome, Malcolm. I'm looking forward to sometime again in the future as well, if it's possible. I'm sure there'll be some new topic to discuss within this space.
Yeah.